Football Generation was released for the PlayStation 2 back in 2006 and was published by Midas Interactive. The game comprises of 44 international teams and 33 club teams that you can play in various leagues, and you also have the ability to play in different game modes with the accessibility of being able to play between 1 and 8 players. So if you have a few friends, you can definitely play a few games together and have a bit of fun. But when you look at the game from a standpoint during that period, the PS2 was starting to produce quite a number of different types of games, but it was also opening up the floodgates for smaller independent companies to start testing ideas and trying their hand at trying to get in on these bigger type of markets, because primarily soccer games at the time were heavily dominated with the likes of the FIFA soccer series and even the Pro Evolution Soccer games. And where this game fits in, it kind of fits in somewhere below those two series, as the game is actually quite decent for what is involved. Now, it's not as well refined or as well polished compared to the more popular series, as I mentioned, but it's definitely more of a budget type of game. Now, it still has all of the bells and whistles and it still plays quite well, but it wouldn't be as fast paced or as intricate as the FIFA and PES series, as the gameplay for the most part does seem to be more on the slower side in terms of its overall game speed and various kind of intricacies and features that it has to offer. It is playable in its own right, but it just doesn't have that finesse that the PES and FIFA games would have, especially during the early days and midpoint of the PlayStation 2's life cycle. Because even though there was a lot of other types of soccer games that were starting to see the light of day, it was very hard to compete with those two iconic series, as they were the two go-to platforms pretty much for all soccer fans. So the only other soccer series that did do quite well alongside of PES and the FIFA series would be the This Is Football franchise, as that was also considered to be another very popular series that had even originally started back on the PlayStation 1. And while it was popular in its own right, it still wouldn't have been as well put together, in my own personal opinion, compared to the likes of the PES and the FIFA games, as I do often reference it, because again, they're the two games that really set the standard for everything that came after it in all respects to it. But this game, from playing it, it plays and feels more very like the World League Soccer series that originally was seen on the PlayStation, with the likes of World League Soccer 98, Michael Owen's World League Soccer 99, and some of the UEFA Champions League games. It plays very, very like those type of soccer games that saw life on the PlayStation. It just has the same kind of look and feel, and even the control systems is very, very like those type of games. It's not to say that they were bad games in general. They were actually quite good football games, but they were very sluggish in their controls and how the game was presented compared to the more mainstream games. It just plays and feels very like those games, but that's not to say it's a bad thing. If anything, it's different and it gives you a different experience, which for many players out there, that's probably something that they would be looking for. But I will admit, it's not without its flaws. The game does have some quite bad flaws in terms of not only just its game speed, but with certain gameplay dynamics. Especially if you get a penalty, you may forget about trying to score a penalty, because the button combinations, like you literally tip the button to take a penalty and you'll just balloon the ball over the bar with virtually no effort. Whoever designed the game, like, and I know I don't like to speak negatively on games, but there's certain elements of certain type of games where they could have done a lot better, but they let themselves down on that front, because the penalties in this game are absolutely atrocious. You can't really score penalties. You'll miss 99% of the penalties that you take, and there's no real way of knowing. Even when you do look at the control system, it doesn't give you an accurate representation of how things will go when you press a certain button or what it's really going to do. It brings everything and kind of overacts every kind of instance in terms of the controls when you're trying to do certain things in the game, and that's really the main flaw that I found from playing it. Just certain things just happen that just doesn't make sense, and it just adds to the overall level of the frustration, to a point that if you're more of a fluent soccer player, now if you've played this game for a while and you put more time into it, then yeah, generally you'll be able to figure out some of the weaknesses and nuances that the game has to offer. But if you're more of a competitive player, this game will probably just frustrate the hell out of you, because it just won't work the way that you would expect when you compare it to more mainstream games. Now, I know the saying is a workman should never blame his tools, which is very true, but in some some respects, if the tools are very poorly designed, there's very little you can do about it. You just have to work with what you have, and it pretty much is the case with this game. It does have some nice ideas and concepts, but it is sadly let down by some of the weird ideas and things that it tried to do or didn't try to do, where it could have improved on. And that's where the frustrations lie, because it doesn't matter how good you are at the game, there's just certain things you just will not have control over, and it just goes way over your head, and you're just left just kind of just sitting there just in amazement by what you've just seen, which is a pity. But then there's a lot of games that are like that as well. And funny thing is, even with the PS2, and I love the PS2, and there's some phenomenal titles. Some of the best games of all time are on the console, but it is also home to some of probably the worst titles ever seen. Some of them are just literally dog water. You'd be thinking to yourself, how is it even possible that many games would even exist, or how they were even allowed to exist? But I suppose that kind of trait has melded itself into today's market as well, because you see a lot of indie games on the likes of modern consoles and stores, and a lot of these quick cheap fix type games, and you're wondering to yourself, how is it even possible that they should even be allowed to be even exist, because some of them are so bad. But it is what it is. And that's not to say and to really put this game down as such. This is actually a fairly decent game if you can put time into it and get to understand certain aspects of it, but there's just certain things out of it that will leave you just scratching your head, just with like not really sure of what to do or what to expect. But unfortunately, that's just the way games are developed. Unless you have big development companies behind you, it'd be very hard to try and match what big companies are doing. And unfortunately, you're always going to be left with flaws and kind of certain kind of gripes with games that are just never going to be as fleshed out or as well ironed out compared to more popular games that you would get to play. So I suppose in a lot of respects, there is a lot of love-hate relationships with many of these games. So this is just another one to add to that list, if you will. Like, it is a decent game for what it does do, but what it does do well. But in other areas, it just could have been better. But that's just my opinion on it anyway. But I'm sure many of you will agree if you have played it yourself. And I would love to know your thoughts on this game if you have played it, and if so, what do you think of it? Did you manage to overcome a lot of those frustrations and hurdles in the game back in the day? Or maybe not. I'd love to hear whatever stories you do have of this football game, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be updated of future videos. And in the meantime, if you would like to see more content around other types of soccer games also seen on the PS2, you can check out the playlist here on the screen to see more of those games in action. And I will see you all in the next one.
It's ended all square, but the crowd certainly can't complain about the quality of the play out there.